You did nothing wrong, even if your heart keeps replaying the moments when the distance began. Even if you lie awake at night wondering how people who share your blood could suddenly feel like strangers. Because what you are experiencing is not rejection, it is protection. And it is happening quietly, deliberately, with a tenderness you cannot yet see. There comes a season when God lowers the volume of your life, when conversations grow shorter, when invitations stop coming, when the warmth you once felt in familiar faces fades into something cold and confusing, and in that silence your mind tries to accuse you, telling you that you failed, that you were too much or not enough, that you broke something sacred. But hear this gently and let it settle. God sees what you don't. He sees the hidden intentions of the heart, the envy that never spoke its name, the control disguised as concern, the resentment hidden beneath family loyalty. And because you belong to Him, He will not allow you to stay where your spirit is slowly being poisoned, even if that place once felt like home. This is divine separation, not because God is harsh, but because He is careful with your peace, your calling, and the tenderness of your heart. When the Bible speaks of light and darkness, it is not condemning people, it is describing alignment. And sometimes the most painful realization is that love by proximity is not the same as love by spirit. Think of Joseph, smiling at the same table as his brothers while their hearts burned with jealousy. And remember that God did not remove Joseph because he was weak, but because his destiny could not survive in an environment that celebrated his silence more than his dreams. What felt like betrayal became the very road that carried him into purpose. And the same pattern is unfolding in your life now, even if all you can feel is loss. This distance is not abandonment, it is alignment. It is God quietly answering the prayers you whispered through tears, the prayers for peace, for clarity, for rest, by removing what disturbed your spirit instead of adding more noise to your life. Peace is sacred, and God guards it like a garden, pruning what looks alive but is stealing nourishment from the roots. You may notice that every conversation with certain family members leaves you exhausted, that joy drains out of you without explanation, that criticism replaces connection, and love feels conditional, transactional, dependent on how much you give and how little you ask. That is not love, and it is not what God designed your heart to carry. Silence, in these moments, is revelation. It exposes what words have hidden for years, and it shows you who loved you for who you are, and who loved you for what you provided. When you stop calling, who checks on you? When you stop explaining yourself, who still believes the best about you? These answers hurt, but they also heal, because God is teaching you that real love endures boundaries, and genuine connection does not disappear when you choose peace over people-pleasing. This is not punishment, it is preparation. Before Abraham could step into blessing, he had to leave what was familiar. Before David could wear a crown, he had to sit alone in caves, learning to trust God without applause or approval. Before Elijah heard the gentle whisper that restored his soul, he had to walk into the wilderness, away from noise, away from expectations, away from the places where his strength had been drained. God rebuilds in isolation, not to break you, but to remake you. He uses distance like spiritual surgery, painful but precise, removing what keeps reopening wounds so healing can finally begin. You may feel lonely now, but you were never forgotten. Heaven is not silent. It is busy reshaping your discernment, strengthening your inner life, and teaching you to rest in God instead of striving for acceptance that will never come. Loss is redirection. Isolation is rebuilding. Separation is alignment. God did not take them from you. He took you from where you didn't belong. And one day, when peace feels normal again, and your heart no longer tightens at the thought of their absence, you will see that this quiet season was not empty at all. It was holy ground where God protected your spirit, restored your clarity, and prepared you for relationships that honor who you are becoming, not who you were forced to be. You were never forgotten, even when the silence felt louder than any argument, even when the absence of familiar voices made you question your worth, because what feels like loss in the natural realm is often redirection in the spiritual one. God sometimes answers prayers not by adding people, but by removing them, because He knows that certain hearts can only love you conditionally, and conditional love will eventually drain the life He placed inside you. This is why silence becomes such a powerful mirror. When everything grows quiet, when you stop proving, fixing, explaining, and performing, the truth surfaces without effort. Those who are aligned with your spirit remain steady. Those who were attached to your usefulness slowly fade. And that fading is not cruelty, it is clarity. You did nothing wrong by outgrowing relationships that could only survive when you stayed small. You did nothing wrong by choosing peace over guilt-based loyalty. Spiritual maturity often requires releasing the belief that suffering is the price of belonging, because God never asked you to bleed in order to be loved. He asked you to follow Him, even when that path leads away from people who cannot see where He is taking you. This is why distance heals. Healing cannot begin in the same environment where the wound is constantly reopened, and God, in His mercy, creates space where your heart can finally breathe again. Think of Jesus, misunderstood by His own brothers, doubted by those closest to Him, yet unwavering in His obedience to the Father. He did not chase approval. He stayed aligned with purpose, trusting that truth would reveal itself in time. Think of Ruth, leaving behind everything familiar, stepping into uncertainty with nothing but faith, and discovering that obedience to separation led her into divine alignment she could never have planned. God always replaces counterfeit connection with covenant connection, but only after the space has been cleared. Before alignment, there must be emptiness. Before restoration, there must be rebuilding. In isolation, God reshapes your inner world. He strengthens your discernment so you no longer confuse familiarity with safety. He restores your confidence so you no longer beg for validation from people who cannot value you. He deepens your intimacy with Him so that when new relationships come, they are built on wholeness, not hunger. This is why the wilderness appears again and again in Scripture. It is not a place of abandonment, but a place of transformation. David learned to worship there. Elijah learned to listen there. Israel learned to depend there. And now, you are learning to trust there. The world may think you are hidden, but heaven knows you are in training. Every unanswered call, every closed door, every misunderstanding was God saying, "This far and no further." Not to punish you, but to preserve you. Peace must be protected, not pleaded for. When the wrong people leave, clarity enters. When confusion exits, direction arrives. When noise fades, God's voice becomes unmistakable. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifts inside you. You stop resenting the distance. You stop chasing what has already been released. You begin to rest, knowing that separation was never the end of love, but the beginning of truth. God is aligning your life with people who pray for you instead of gossiping about you, who celebrate your growth instead of competing with it, who recognize your worth without needing to be reminded. These are relationships that do not require you to shrink, explain, or betray your own peace. One day, you will look back and see the pattern clearly, how every goodbye made space for a divine hello, how every season of silence sharpened your discernment, how every lonely night strengthened your faith. What once felt cruel will reveal itself as careful. What once felt like abandonment will reveal itself as protection. And you will understand, with a quiet gratitude that settles deep in your soul, that God was never breaking your heart. He was blessing it, guiding you out of darkness and into alignment, leading you away from what could not go with you and toward the life he prepared for you all along.